Hello, I'm Debbie Williams, 4-H faculty in Walla Walla County. I oversee the 4-H Master Gardener and Master Food Preserver programs. I have worked in Extension for 19 years, 16 in my current position. Personal interviews or orientations are essential for me to vet a potential volunteer. This presentation is how I effectively screen volunteers through personal interviews. Effectively screening volunteers through personal interviews, engaging volunteers from the start. Our new volunteer process is complete an application, get a clean background check back, contact references, get those positive references back, and the personal interview or orientation. Why personal interviews? They're important to me because I want to make sure that the potential volunteer is a good match for our program. I want to understand what their talents and interests are and have them understand our program. This decreases conflict and lets them understand their commitment. I use it as onboarding, giving them enough information to get started before they attend other training. The agenda for the personal interview includes a little about the WSU Extension Office, the programs we have here, policies, finances, risk management and liability, child protection, conflict management, training and what's required, resources we have for them, different events, and how councils and foundations function. Then we talk about whether it's a good match for both. On the overview, I like them to know what's going on in Extension. It's a good chance to let them know what happens here and who the staff are, the facilities we have, and the different programs. When they come in, lets them kind of know what might be going on when activities are going on when they come in to work in the office. And it lets them know up front how busy we are and that they just can't be the idea person that staff then must execute their plan. The next big thing for me is why the program. For 4-H, it's like how we view the program. It's everything about the life skills, how they can expect us to react to issues and conflict. We're about helping kids deal with disappointment, not removing them from it. We talk about the life wheel is essential when we're dealing with anything, planning or responding to conflict, because we want the good character. The valuable partnership document explains behavior that we expect from the volunteer, and that positive adult role models really help us out in our program. We're a proven intentional prevention program for youth, and so we want them to understand that. We also want to understand what their interests are. For Master Gardeners, how we view the program is it's a volunteer program. It's not just about gaining knowledge and hanging out, but we need them to give those volunteer hours back. We don't have enough space and time to train people that don't volunteer in our program. But they get wonderful knowledge, social interaction, special projects that they're interested in, and they really get to serve the community. Master Food Preservers and Food Safety, real similar to just that providing the safe equipment and recipes and wonderful knowledge, social interaction, again, special projects. They get to serve our community and help keep them safe. Same with shore stewards, waste warriors, beach watchers, and other entities, other programs, still provides those same things we've been talking about, but they get to serve our community and help save the environment, help people make good choices. Then program policy is big, how people are enrolled, how they can complete their training, how we document things. We also need to do civil rights documentation, how to get event and fundraising approval, risk management plans, our finance rules, and child safety. For finance, we all are going to have to handle money at one time or another, more than likely, in our programs, and we must have an EIN. That's an employee identification number with the IRS. We talk to these potential volunteers about how all money must go through bank accounts, how to handle funds, how we need to protect the name of WSU and our programs and use emblems correctly, and that there needs to be a financial summary, and there'll be an audit by 4-H staff. Risk management and liability, I talked to the potential volunteer about what liability they may have and how to help mitigate that, like being formally enrolled, following policy, making sure their activities are approved and known about, having risk management plans for their activities, needing to put in those volunteer hours so that they look like a regular volunteer, and that they may consider personal homeowners umbrella policy if they have activities at their house or feel that they may be at risk. They might want to have a policy. WSU does share in the liability if those policies are being followed and people are doing what they're supposed to, is if a volunteer is sued and they're following all of that we just talked about, the Attorney General's office and WSU will help share in that liability and help support that volunteer in the case of a lawsuit. There's also L&I benefits available if they get injured while performing their volunteer duties. And there's event insurance, such as American Income Life, that may be prudent in some situations. Child safety. For child protection, in any of these programs where we're working with youth, it's mandatory for staff to report any child abuse concerns. And it's the same for volunteers. So volunteers, I make them understand that volunteers are mandatory reporters as well. And that we must have a certified volunteer supervising youth at all times, that a family member or trusted friend cannot oversee those youth, and that parents are responsible for transportation, and that staff and volunteers should not make arrangements for youth to be transported by other parents and family and friends. That's up to the parent. For conflict management, I talked to the volunteer. We don't want to scare them, but we know that conflict can happen. Staff are available for support. I want them to understand that, and that faculty can mediate some of those, or a county director. One of the rules in our county is that I prefer that parents and members go to one of the volunteer leaders if they can on concerns, and then work up through the program coordinator, through the faculty member, maybe the county director, and then to WSU Extension at the state level, because any of those entities will forward them back to that volunteer lead if they haven't shared their concern with them, if at all possible. All of our programs have continuing requirements, so I talked to the potential volunteer about those, about re-enrollment. That gives an option to not continue a volunteer, and in a easier way than a dismissal, but they need to re-enroll each year, that we do routine background checks beyond their first enrollment, and that they really need to do the volunteer hours reporting, that we require minimum participation, and most of our programs have continuing education, and they must follow the policy to continue in the program. For training, we talk about the different programs and what's required for them to be a leader, be a volunteer. And this is just an example of our 4-H volunteer training. Our other volunteer trainings can include more live classroom training, online WSU classes, or maybe from another university through WSU, clinics, labs, field work, trainees working with a veteran volunteer, and some advanced classes. So we talk in detail about what's required. And we let them know what resources will be available to them, project materials, learning lab kits, that we have program coordinators and state coordinators to provide resources for them. They're not on their own in working with the public and providing service, and we teach them how to do internet searches with the rules to stay with researched information. But they're not on their own just from their memory, that we have a good bunch of resources for them to rely on. We talk about events. We have calendars for them to look at to see if it fits into their schedule. We talk about additional education opportunities beyond our own county, some of the community service projects that we do that they might be interested in, and leadership opportunities within their program. We talk about councils and foundations, what their purpose is, and the restrictions on those. These councils and foundations only exist to serve the program in partnership with local staff and state program staff. Most of the time, they're not going to decide policy, the program strategic plan, and definitely whether or not we accept or dismiss a volunteer. But they should have input on these, and there are ground floor grassroots volunteers, so they really need to have input into the changes and the planning that we make. All funds should be audited by WSU staff annually for these councils and foundations. They don't operate on their own. They're formal nonprofits, and they're raising money in the name of the program. So we need to make sure that what they're doing is appropriate and that we protect the WSU name and the program name. We talk about where their meetings are, and definitely these benefits where they really have valuable service and we get input from them to continue our programs. So the big deal at the end, I make it clear all the way through that we're going to work through what's required, answer questions, listen to their interests and their goals, and then see, is this a good match? Do their interests and goals line up with our program? Do they have the time availability to make the training and volunteering requirements? Is there a special interest of theirs that may be of a concern that we're just probably not going to do in the program, that it doesn't match up? Is that going to be a deal breaker for them? And we really want to look at those things versus the policy of the program and the strategic plan of that program. We don't have to accept a volunteer, but we need to be equitable, and we need to document why we have not chosen them carefully. So why personal interviews? I want the potential volunteer to really understand the program and the expectation, and to make sure it's a good match. I believe this saves time, it's less frustrating, and there's less conflict in the long run. It also gives the volunteer, for me, a formal start date when they are not a volunteer, and when they are, they get a welcome to the program email from me. You are now a volunteer, as formal, so they know when they're really starting. Are there any questions? I hope this has been helpful to effectively screen volunteers for our program. I find this very helpful in vetting these potential volunteers, and to make it understood that they're, just because they've signed up, that they're interested in being a volunteer, that they're not a volunteer yet, and that we've worked with us to make sure they're a good match and to get them the training and the background, everything that they need to get started as a successful volunteer. Thank you.